Former director of NSA and CIA, but been out of government now for more than 8 years. And for all of those 8 years, I've been with the Chertoff Group. I'm a principal here and a plank holder. I was here the first day we hung our shingle out. We're a strategic consulting firm. We operate at the strategic level. We don't rent perimeter security guards, nor we do forensics on hard drives, but we do talk to our clients about making themselves more secure against all variety of threats. But within that, as you might expect, it's with each passing day, we're spending more and more time talking to our clients about cyber dangers, cyber threats, and how they should respond to those dangers. By and large, what we try to do at the strategic level is to give them a realistic sense of the threat. And we're not apocalyptic, but we are quite serious with regard to the dangers that are out there. We talk about potential ways forward that they can make themselves more secure. And then I think we're actually a pretty good source for suggesting to our clients not how much is enough, because that's a very difficult question in the cyber domain, but suggesting to them what are best practices. What are the kinds of things we are seeing out there from the kinds of companies that have just been described that others in similar circumstances have been relying on to make themselves the most difficult target that they can be? Well, yeah, we do an awful lot of conversations with the financial industry. In fact, if you ask me to kind of give a macro view of the American economy, the two parts of the economy that are most seized of this issue, and appropriately so, the power industry and financial services, because frankly, they both have to be outward facing in order to do their business at all. So we do spend an awful lot of time with financial services. And the good news is that we don't have to do much sermonizing about how vulnerable they are to cyber attacks. They got that. What they want now are realistic ways forward, again, to make themselves as tough a target as possible. And within that, one of the things that we really stress now is just not defending yourself at the perimeter, just not reducing your vulnerability, reducing your attack surface, the firewalls, the cyber hygiene, the passwords, and so on, all still very important. What we're also now doing, frankly, saying that's necessary but not sufficient. And we're suggesting to our clients what they really need to be able to do is to manage consequences, to respond to attack, to expect to be penetrated, to survive while penetrated, to discover, recover, be able to be resilient in order and able to continue work even in the face of sustained cyber attack. That requires a kind of situational awareness, a kind of currency as to what's happening on your own network that really isn't the same as that old, I've got to build me a perimeter that's tough to penetrate. Still important, but the battle is going to be won or lost after penetration now. So I guess the first comment I'd make is whoever asked that question on the board needs to have the capacity to understand the answer that's coming back from the person to whom he had asked the question. In other words, one of the things we emphasize to our clients is that you need expertise on the board with regard to this kind of threat, the way you've got fiscal and financial expertise on the board to deal with Sarbanes-Oxley and a whole bunch of other federal requirements. In other words, for success, you're going to have to repopulate your board with the kinds of folks who actually understand the very nature of this threat, the capacities we have to respond, and can actually measure, based upon life experience and knowledge, can actually measure what it is they're being told by your chief information officer or chief security officer, whether that's a good or a bad answer, a sufficient or an insufficient answer. That's the first message we have, that cybersecurity is a function of the senior leadership of an enterprise, not something that's outsourced to the CTO or the CIO or the CSO. It's not just vulnerability reduction, it's consequence management, it's the response to the attack, the acceptance that sooner or later you're going to be penetrated. So a couple of observations. Number one, if I'm on the board, I want to know whether the CEO really gets this. Doesn't have to be a technologist, but does he understand that business success here depends on cyber awareness, that it's not a subtraction from his bottom line, it is integral to his top line. So that's one. The second is what we call in the military situational awareness, kind of that God's eye view of your own network. And so the question I would then ask, who, if anyone in this organization, for which I'm a board member, has a God's eye view of a network so that he or she can detect anomalous activity? And then, does he or she have the authority to fight the network? In other words, in order to respond to the penetration, does he or she have the authority on their own to begin to kind of take the kinds of actions that do ensure that you discover, recover, respond, and can be resilient? Because time is really critical here. So my experience largely in this regard was within government, but the problem's not different at all. I mean, I've been at National Security Council meetings where we're talking about some particularly edgy defensive or offensive operation, and it's clear to me that those 60 and 70 somethings around the table really aren't quite following what the expert at the end of the table is trying to tell them about. One of the things I thought was pure gold when I was at NSA was to find the kinds of people who were technologically excellent and could speak to me in liberal arts English in order to explain fundamentally what was going on. So to a first order, we actually do this at the Chertoff Group, we recommend you find the people in your organization or you hire the people for your organization who can explain what it is they're about in plain, understandable English to, frankly, a generation of board members who will forever be digital immigrants, never digital natives. So again, with regard to the Chertoff Group, we don't come in with blue widgets and red widgets and make a recommendation, but we do have a fairly healthy understanding of what constitutes best practices in vulnerability reduction, in detection and response, even in cyber threat intelligence, for example, which is another whole area that's opened up. So we can recommend to our clients, here's the gold standard here. It needs something like this needs to be part of your entire package of approach. But let me reinforce something just pointed out. This is a team effort. It's based upon total understanding of everyone in the team about what is going on here. And we do tell our clients there are no magical boxes out there that makes you able to kind of do like this with your hands and walk away from the issue. Back to our primary example, you will be penetrated. It's about discovery and response. It's about fighting the network. I'm sorry to keep using military terms, but this is a continuous meeting engagement. This is not a castle and a siege. Yeah, I do. And there's an awful lot of what we at the Chertoff Group would call entrepreneurial and technological energy in the private sector along all vectors of cybersecurity. We sketch out a simple risk equation. Risk is equal to the threat times your vulnerability times the consequence. And I've already said that vulnerability reduction remains very important, although it is more a bit of our past history than our current history. You have consequence management. That's the response, recovery, resilience, discovery aspect. Right now, we see the highest amount of energy in that. And then over here in the T factor, the threat, in physical space, you deal with the threat by trying to reduce it. Hard to do in the cyber domain, really hard to do if you're a private sector company. So the energy we see in the T factor right now is in cyber threat intelligence, which frankly, as a former director of NSA, I see private companies out there very aggressive. Web crawling, port scanning, foreign national employees assuming persona in Moldovan chat rooms, for example, in order to give warning to their clients. So I do see one of the good news stories of the cybersecurity challenge. It is not that our government's gotten a lot better at this just recently, because that's going to be just a slow road because of the nature of government and the nature of this problem. But the energy we see in the private sector in terms of discovery, and I think ultimately this is leading in the direction of integration, not just a garden of one-offs where you get to go and pick this one or that one or the other one. And so with regard to investment and discovery, I do think it is moving in the direction where these things get integrated into the system itself rather than what we've been forced to do for the last 25 years, which is to bolt them on as an afterthought. Yeah, we talked to a variety of folks, particularly in New York, both formal and informal conversations. If we'd have done this 3 or 4 years ago, we probably would be laser focused on the confidentiality of data, because that's where the greatest amount of attack, the greatest amount of danger had been located. The more we go forward, I actually see folks talking about the integrity and the availability of data, and particularly the integrity of data when it comes to financial services and something like hedge funds. Now, I'm not suggesting we would trade off confidentiality, consciously anyway, in order to just get better confidence in the integrity of data, but we have seen a migration and sense of danger that although you might be able to live with a loss of confidentiality over here, there are certain industries, like the one you just mentioned, that can't survive